Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the MGH Clay Center's Ask Ellen Q&A. I'm Ellen Broughton, and I'm co-director at the Clay Center for Young Healthy Minds. And today we're going to be talking about how you can help your child learning this summer and how to keep them engaged and active during this summer. It's a different summer than we've all had ever in our lives. I want to remind you, though, that we are live streaming this event and that the Clay Center will be recording this presentation. This presentation is for informational purposes only. And if you have any specific questions, please consult your pediatrician or your mental health clinician. So before we get started, I'm very eager to take your questions. I wanted to just say a couple of things about this summer in particular. But in general, summertime has often been an opportunity for parents and families to slow down, to reflect, and to reset. And I would encourage you during this summer to use this time to continue to connect and experiment with new ways to prioritize well-being and lifelong skills, and skills like resiliency and curiosity and creativity. We've never had a time in our lives where we have the opportunity to do that with our kids. And I am hearing so many wonderful stories about how families are happy to have their college students home for the summer, or even young adults who have come home to be with their families. I know this is also a very stressful time if you've been educating your child for the last 3 or 4 months. But I think also, as much as I'm hearing stressed parents and that stress is real, I'm also hearing a lot of tales of resiliency and tales of children who are getting tired of playing video games and want to know how to connect in different ways with their family. Now, I'm going to take a look at some of the questions that are coming in and some of the comments. I want to keep a few things in mind as we're talking today. We had asked for your questions and your comments about what you'd like to hear most. And your 3 most pressing questions were these. 1, you want to hear more about ways to promote structure. 2nd, you want to hear more about ways to promote social and emotional growth. And then you want to hear more about specific learning activities. Now, the structure one is one that is very at the top of all of our minds, both adults and children. And I think that when we're talking about structure, we're really talking about looking at what works for your family and deciding how much time you need to do different things. Now, before I get into kind of like making a structured plan and thinking about that, I think that one of the things I want to talk about is that one of the wonderful things about summer is that it's a lack of structure. And there is a lot of data that would show that our executive functions, and we spend a lot of time talking about executive functioning and what that means to the developing brain, but executive functions actually do best in unstructured time. So this is not necessarily a time that you need to think of that your child's not learning anything, but that this unstructured time can be a time where your child is actually learning an awful lot because it is an unstructured time. So let's talk a little bit about this study that I was talking about that has given information about children's executive functioning. Now, executive functioning is that part of the brain that organizes, it reflects, it plans. It's all of those things that are the sign of a mature, healthy brain. It's all the things that we want children to get. We want them to be healthy and mature adults. What I find, though, is that it doesn't really improve very much when they're in schedules that are very rigid, because they never have to be flexible then. They never have to plan ahead if their world is all organized for them. And so it's good for kids to have off time. They're actually better off in many cases when they're outside of school, where they can jump and run and play and create and imagine and do all the other things that they can't typically engage in when they're really busy. So sometimes kids just need to be left alone. And when we're talking about structuring time, it's okay to structure in some time where they're left alone, doing new things of their own choosing, engaging in self-motivated kinds of hobbies, play, sandlot time, what we would call the kinds of sports. Of course, even sports are a little bit difficult now, but the kinds of sports that they might be able to participate in with either family members who they've been quarantined with or other people who are safe to hang out with. There's also the idea, too, of hanging out in nature. And I think that that's an important thing to also consider. I've got a question here from Sarah about our parents in my community are starting to get their summer reading lists, but our local library isn't open yet during COVID. A question that's been coming up in my community is, we have to do our summer reading online. Should I worry about how much screen time this is adding? Since everything they do now is in front of another screen. So what I was just saying about nature, I think this is the other side of that. And this is why it can become even more important for kids to be outside right now, doing things, just hanging out, doing nothing outside, because they are going to have to spend a fair amount of time on their computers. And I mentioned earlier that I've had more than just a couple of adolescents and young adolescents, preteens, tell me that they were kind of sick of playing video games, sick of being in front of a screen. And so you want to make sure that your screen time is used just for things that they really need to be doing. And what I would mention is one of them would be reading, although I personally think it's great for kids to curl up with a book. And you might want to think about safe ways to exchange books with other families. That might be a way of keeping the social relationships going from afar. But I think that reading this summer is a very, very important thing. And I would also say, when we were talking about unstructured time and scheduling that in, I think reading for pleasure is something that kids don't do enough these days. And so finding books, whether it's online or exchanging with other families in the neighborhood in a safe way, I think having kids read books that are sometimes too easy for them, sometimes just enjoyable. When we go to the beach and when we're on vacation, we don't read War and Peace. We read something fun and enjoyable that helps us learn about characters and feelings and gives us a real suspenseful story that makes us want to read more. And those are the kinds of books that I think kids should also be reading along with their reading lists. So, what are some of the other new things that I think kids could be doing these days? Because you did mention that some of the things that you're curious about is, what can you be doing? What are some activities that could be happening for kids? So let me read you some of the things that I had on my list. So there are different, really, I think, clusters of areas that kids could be thinking about right now, and you could be thinking about doing with them. One big area is to think about how you can be of service to someone else. You know, we've spent the last few days really mourning as a country and as a world the horrible things that can happen in our world, and that's not the focus of our talk today, but I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot going on that's hard to process, and people are feeling helpless as to how to change the world for the better. So one of the things you might think about in terms of activities for the summer, which also go along with structuring your world, is how can you be of service? I think there are two ways of being of service. One is to be of service with your own family. And we don't always think about that's where our ability to learn to serve others really comes from. It's where we learn how to empathize with others, how to know what another person might need. So being of service within your family can include things like doing chores, helping with gardening, helping with the yard work, preparing a meal, taking care of siblings, taking care of pets. So build that into your schedule. But being of service can also mean being of service in the community, of course. And I think a lot of people think that that's not possible right now because we can't be out doing things. But there are things that you could be doing. And some of the specific things that I was thinking about recommending are delivering groceries to those who are in need, sewing masks for others, offering virtual help to seniors, getting online and helping them figure out how to download different things or use their computers, or doing those sorts of things for seniors in your neighborhood who might be feeling like they're not well connected with each other, or even just your parents or grandparents, speaking from personal experience. Doing things like writing thank you notes to first responders and to frontline workers and to those who are caring for others at this time. I know when I walk around a neighborhood and I see a lot of support in the windows of the stores that are yet to be opened, or in houses, things that are made by children that support others and say thank you to others, not only helps the people walking past who actually did something, but it also gives light and life to those who are just feeling like the world seems like a scary and somewhat difficult place right now. Some other ways to help is just to support a cause you care about by writing letters to elected officials or participating virtually in some kind of cause. So I see another question here. My 6-year-old had a hard time transitioning to kindergarten last year and is already getting anxious about moving to first grade. I'm worried he's going to have an even harder time next year since we've gotten out of the habit of actually going to school. Do you have any tips on how to ease his anxiety over the summer and maybe closer to next year? I think that anxiety often is at its worst when we don't know what's happening. So anxiety is either caused by an irrational fear of something that's happening, or a rational fear. Let's put that in its own bucket too. Sometimes we're anxious for a really good reason. This kind of falls in the middle of that. There's an anxiety of the unknown. He doesn't know what's to be expected. And also, it's a little scary coming into a new group at the beginning of a year. So I think one of the things you want to do is acknowledge what part of the anxiety is normal and healthy. And that's okay, and it's what we would expect. And that's a good thing because it makes us plan ahead. When we start to feel like anxious, and you can explain this to a first grader, when you start to feel anxious about something, it means that, oh, I better figure out why that is. And so one reason why that is for him is he doesn't know what to expect. So the answer to that is helping him figure out what to expect. Problem with this year is we don't really know what to expect. So I think keeping that in mind, that you're going to have to think a little bit harder about what it is that might be expected in school. And as the adult in this situation, you can get as much information as you can from the school, and then to the best that you can, have him mimic a day or two of the school day. So as best you can, have him drive past the school in the morning around the time that you're going to have to drop him off. Get used to getting up in the morning for school, not now, but at the end of the summer when it looks like school is going to happen. Visit the classroom if it's possible, and I'm guessing it would be possible if school is open. So I would definitely caution you to think about some of those things. What are the sorts of things that he needs to be prepared for literally? In terms of the habit of going to school, my guess is that we might see kids who are kind of excited to be with other students as opposed to worried about being with other students at this time. So what I mean is that there's a lot that you can compare this to. You can sort of take a look at this and say, you haven't been with your friends all summer. Are you looking forward to this? Is this something you really want to happen? If not, you can start to talk about that. Now, again, I'm assuming that school can happen this summer, this fall year. Let's say that it does. I would do then some of the things that I would recommend any other school year. The things that I just recommended, trying to get in, at least peek at the classroom, meet the teacher in advance, maybe spend some time with his friends before school starts, especially if they've been apart all summer. And then also things like taking the bus or going on the bus route and that sort of thing. If this isn't going to happen this year, then I think it's really time to talk to your school system, your teachers, about ways that they think you can manage the anxiety given the structure that's already put into place. And so it might be learning from home, it might be some combination of learning from home. And then the other thing that might be of issue to your child this particular year with the anxiety is that your child may be anxious about the combination of everything. Anxious about starting a new school year, anxious about not having been with his friends for a long time, anxious about getting sick. And so in the best terms that you can, you want to just explain what's going to happen and what we know about coronavirus at that particular time. We have a lot of good information on the Clay Center website about how to talk to your kids about this issue. I would also recommend staying in touch as the summer unfolds and as this situation continues to see about the kinds of things that experts are recommending you talk to your child about. So from Casey, I see a question. My 15-year-old son has been spending a lot of time playing video games since COVID. He probably won't be able to get a summer job, but I have no idea what to suggest to him. I feel like all my ideas would sound boring to a 15-year-old who likes video games. Do you have ideas for teenagers? You know, I actually do, and I've been thinking about this, that I know there's not a whole lot of space to have a summer job right now. So I think that some of the things that a teenager could do, though, is you've got to think outside of the box some. I did some looking online, and there are some online summer camps for students. And you could participate as a counselor at a summer camp. And I think also if you've got a really exceptional kind of student, teenager at home who really likes doing things with video games and online, you know, there's a lot of ways to do things online for other students by being a virtual babysitter, for example, by tutoring younger students online, by starting your own business that is, you know, you're virtually meeting with people like car washing, landscaping, house painting. Those sorts of summer jobs can still occur. You're just going to have to sell yourself via the internet. Also things like helping somebody build a website, or again, you know, maybe tutoring somebody or teaching somebody, an older adult in the neighborhood or an older adult that you know who might need some help building a website, who might want to, you know, get out there and start earning some money or self-promote themselves, but they don't know how to do that. So if you got a 15-year-old who's at home who likes to spend a lot of time on the internet, I think one thing you could do is to think about some of those ways of still being on there. I also think that another kinds of things that you might want to suggest to your 15-year-old or even 13-year-old, 12-year-old is to think about how to not just consume media, but also produce media. So making things like a short family film or video. You might be one of those families who has a lot of things, a lot of videos that you'd like to get organized, or even a lot of pictures from generations before that need to get digitalized. And their grandparent might have some of those sorts of things that they always wanted to get organized. That's a great job for a teen to do. Creating their own YouTube channel, or starting an online book club or an online movie club or an online Netflix club. You also might want to spend some time watching documentaries that they like. And you're right that a lot of times teenagers think our ideas are boring, but sometimes watching documentaries of things that they are really interested in. It might be a rap singer, it might be a certain time in history, it might be something that you aren't necessarily that interested in, but they might be. That's another way to sort of share things. And I also think that going on virtual tours of museums and that sort of thing. And again, these are the sorts of things that if your child is being a virtual babysitter, for example, they can kind of think of the sorts of things that a younger child might enjoy doing virtually with them that could be educational. So here's another question. My 8-year-old child has so much anger about missing school, friends, normalcy this spring. How do I gauge what is healthy and normal reaction, and what tips into a major problem? I can't fathom counseling via Zoom. She'd hit the roof. So I understand that. Although you might be surprised, I am seeing a lot of kids who never wanted to try counseling all of a sudden now be okay with it because it is virtual. It doesn't feel like it's that like you're going to see a doctor. But let's put that on the back shelf because it doesn't sound like what you're saying leads me to believe that counseling is necessarily what's needed anyway. Because a lot of kids are having trouble with anger about missing school and friends and doing things that are normal this spring. I think that one of the things you want to do is to put in as much structure, but also as much freedom as you can, so that there is a new kind of normalcy, meaning that we know that, on these days, we're just going to hang out on Tuesday and Thursday mornings and sleep in and just whatever. And then on other days, we're going to really make an effort to get together with school friends, to get together with things. So I think that one of the things you want to do is to acknowledge the anger and empathize with it. It's really tough right now, and it's tough for everyone. And I think that talking about that is important. I also think that some of the things that I just mentioned, which include giving to others or learning something new, can help that feeling of sort of like life is going to move forward and push forward. Because a lot of the anger has to do with things that are lost. And so finding new things can help somewhat with that. In terms of it being a healthy or a normal reaction, I think that if it is lasting a lot, if it's lasting much more than just a passing angry outburst, but it's happening multiple times a day, most days of the week, and it's happening regardless of what you're trying to do, I think that's when you start to think that it's a major problem. When you see a child who is crying all the time, upset all the time, it doesn't matter what you do to help, nothing seems to quiet them down. Everything is awful, terrible, I don't want that. That's kind of signs of depression in a kid. And that might be time to talk with somebody. And you mentioned that you can't fathom counseling with your child counseling. I think it's a she. She'd hit the roof. But you can get some tips from people at this time. And there are a lot of counselors that are available to talk through in more specifics what's going on. Because what you want to really figure out is you want to figure out what's really getting in the way here. Is your child feeling ostracized from school? Is she not able to get involved in what's going on online? Is she just a real extrovert who's having trouble doing and being forced to do more introverted sort of tasks? Working with a therapist, even just once or twice, and talking out some of these things can be helpful for you, even though your daughter might not need actual therapy. But I think that people are much more available. Psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers are much more available than they were in the past, knowing that parents might have different sorts of questions. And you might not have to really think of this as therapy, but more as a consultation, a consultation with a professional to talk about what's going on in your family and to determine whether or not this is an important thing at this particular time. I'm just taking a look to see if there are any other questions that I have missed. So if not, I want to get back to some of the other issues and sort of bring in some of the things that you have mentioned already. So I was talking about the fact that this problems with anger and missing school and missing friendships bring up an important issue, which is how do we help kids keep up with their social relationships at this particular time? And I think that one of the ways kids are doing it is via Zoom, via, sometimes even, and you have to talk with your doctor about this and your local government about whether or not it's safe, but sometimes going for walks, being well prepared with masks, going out and doing some of those things, I think are important. Also, it might take you getting on the phone or online with other parents to see what's happening. And I think that we're in a tough situation as parents and as teachers too, because we don't really know what's going on. So it might mean that you need to look on their devices, talk with other parents, get a sense of what's really going on. In the case of an 8-year-old, you're assuming that they're talking to other people online. You're assuming they're getting what they need at school when they're with other kids, but likely they're not. And you aren't necessarily privy to what the content is. So I think that you want to really have a talk with your child as to what's been happening in their social relationships, regardless of their age. What's been happening in their social relationships over the past 3 months? What do they hope to get out of them in the next 3 months? And then talk about what the reality of that is like. Talk about different scenarios. What if we're in quarantine for the next 3 months? What do you want your social relationships to look like? How can I facilitate that as a mom? How can I help other parents facilitate that as well? But then also talk about the fact that it might not be like this forever. It actually will not be like this forever, for sure. But let's imagine some different scenarios then. Let's say it's possible to have some limited visits. Who would you want to visit? Who's it more important to visit? I think that those kinds of very concrete discussions help kids' anxiety. They help their ability to problem solve and be flexible in their thinking, and it helps them become more organized. It's really, you're teaching not only them to sort of think about what they want out of their social relationships, but you're also helping them develop some of those executive function skills that are important. I think too that one of the things that I didn't mention, and we've touched upon these, regardless of the age of the child, I think that you want to really think about the rituals that you have in your family. And so establishing some rituals right now at this time is really important because we've lost a lot of rituals over the last, especially month or so. We've lost graduations, weddings, funerals. We've lost those end of school rituals too. You know, thinking about the 8-year-old who had a lot of anger about, the end of the school, I don't blame them. It's tough. It's really, really tough to have lost some of these things. So how do you do that? I think that a lot of families have done wonderful things, creating rituals around graduation and virtual rituals, driving through the neighborhood on certain people's birthdays to celebrate in different ways. But I think thinking about those sorts of things, what could you do right now at a time when you're kind of stuck together as a family? Hosting game nights virtually, researching a destination and virtually traveling there, planning ahead for vacations that you will have in the future, learning to cook, reading aloud as a family, scheduling routine video chats with extended family and friends, having your child organize online summer parties, really remembering and looking ahead as to what are the rituals that we want to celebrate going forward in this summer and in this time of learning. And all of these things that I have been describing are all learning activities. Again, anytime a child has to research something, plan ahead, decide how to organize something, these are the skills that they really need in school. And they actually can learn these skills better in a more freer environment than they can when they're studying for a test. So I think we've given you a lot of ideas about what to do this summer with your child. And I know we have a lot of ideas on our Clay Center website. And I'm really excited that I had this opportunity to talk to you today. Again, I think that one of the things that we don't have on our website are some of what I call virtual camps. It wasn't until I started to prepare for this today that I realized there are camps out there for kids in the summer. They're just virtual. So take a look at what's offered. I know there are a few things that are that are free. They're Camp Kinda, Camp Wide Open School. There's a number of academic centers of learning are offering camps for school-age children, like Stanford University. And then there are some fee-based camps as well, like DIY for kids and Creative Bug. So I think you might want to take a look at that. There are also a lot of great classes for college age and high school age students that they can take over the summer. All right, I think I will. Our time is running short, and I will say goodbye. I think that if you have more questions or more comments, we always love to hear from you at the Clay Center. Please take a look at what we have on our Facebook page and also at mghclaycenter.org. Thank you so much for this time. Bye.